So tell us about yourself, like why don't you do a little bit of intro yourselves?
Thanks, Jocelyn. So I was a lawyer for 5 years, and being a lawyer, you get to see how sort of the systems of society and economy work, and they weren't working very well in my mind. I think one of the reasons I wanted to get into the whole space of the law was we get to create these systems, we get to make the systems that help people work together and help people trust each other. And I think that's one of the most exciting things about blockchain, is that it's actually about remaking systems. We met at a event that I held the other night at Future Ward in Taipei Central, which was this awesome innovation space, and I got to meet these two incredible people who are both interested in blockchain and governance. My talk was actually about decentralizing governance, and I think that's one of the fundamental things about legal systems and blockchain and technology and how they all come together, is that we get to rethink how we govern ourselves and how we rebuild trust in institutions, how we design best practices for how we work together and manage things like the commons, and how we make markets fairer and more equitable. So in my last 8 years, I've been working on legal technology at Stanford University. I run a blockchain group at Codex, which is a center that sits between the law school and computer science department at Stanford University. And we study legal informatics, which is the science of information flow through the legal system. So we run a whole bunch of different projects through the center at Codex. But the blockchain group is one that's really been taking off over the last year. One really big project that we just launched out of that group is called the Stanford Journal for Blockchain Law and Policy. And that's the first real credible academic journal for the blockchain space, and it's really designed to help lawyers and policymakers, regulators of all of our different industries, not just financial systems, but every single different industry. It's designed to help them get into the space, help them understand that this space is going to be really important, and help to try and filter out some of the signal from a lot of the noise. Because this space right now, there's a lot of people jumping in, there's a lot of speculation, there's a lot of people making a lot of money, but more than making money, I think that this technology can be truly transformational for the way we work together, the way we live together, and the way we do great things together. So, thanks, Leslie.
Thanks. And let's just go back to the workshop that you mentioned where we met. So you talked about blockchain governance, and obviously it's a very important area, but it's been overlooked by a lot of blockchain projects, protocols at the moment as well. And from your perspective, from a lawyer's perspective, first of all, tell us why blockchain governance is a very important area in the blockchain technology development phase, and secondly, what do you think are some of the most important things that we should think about when we start to talk about or design blockchain governance?
Well, that's a really big question, Jocelyn. So I'll try and just skim the surface, but over the course of the next few weeks and over the course of the last few weeks, I've been holding a lot of these just get-togethers, really, where I get to meet wonderful people like yourself and we really dig in deep. So I'm going to scratch the surface right now. So blockchain governance, it's about how we actually manage all of these blockchain ecosystems. Joe, you're working on one. Jocelyn, you've worked for several. And the thing that's going to actually differentiate what makes one blockchain technology and ecosystem more relevant than another isn't necessarily going to be the technology itself anymore, because fundamental to the blockchain ecosystem is the fact that a lot of the technology is open source. It's very different from a lot of the technology ecosystems that come before, because it's premised on the fact that an entire code base can be forked. You can take a whole code base, just like Ethereum did, and you can fork it over. So that's why you had Ethereum and then Ethereum Classic. The only difference between the two is that they had different governance systems. Same with Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. They just fork the whole code base, and then you have to decide as a miner or as a participant which one you believe in more. And the whole thing around governance is around belief. It's around belief systems. And so the thing that's going to actually define which blockchain works and which is more successful is going to be the governance system. The governance system is about how we make decisions, how we choose who is in and who is out, how we choose how we sanction people if they do something wrong. And these are the sorts of things that lawyers and policymakers and really systems builders have thought about for quite a long time. And now, as we start entering this new generation of ways to work together, using technology as well to really sort of enforce some of these governance systems in fairer, more efficient ways, that whole question of governance is actually going to decide who wins and who loses. So, Joe, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about some of the things that you've seen in terms of blockchain governance and with working with your software brethren.
So when I first got interested in blockchain about a year ago, I was really looking into some of the projects and seeing, how the software develops over time. For example, if there's a split with something like Bitcoin, we'll disagree on what direction to go in. It's really interesting that you have to kind of figure out a way to choose where to go next. And so the thing that was really making me most interested in this was the idea of how do you redesign organizations to be decentralized so that power is distributed in a way that makes sense and it's fair and transparent. And then I happened upon this new job as a blockchain architect, so I'm having to really start think about how should token holders participate in this ecosystem and everyone else that's involved. And so I guess the question I might have for you is, in your opinion, what would be a piece of advice for someone designing a new governance system for a blockchain project?
So one thing that I mentioned in our gathering the other day was to check out some of the work of both Elinor Ostrom and Christopher Allen. Elinor Ostrom was actually one of the first women who won the Nobel Economics Prize. It was actually just in the early 2000s. She and her husband had been working for a long time on design principles and frameworks for managing common pool resources. So the sort of technical term that she used for something that maybe we've heard of more is just called the commons. She had a series of 7 principles which essentially sort of lay down the way that people can think about how, in a decentralized way, we can manage things where we have common goals or where we have common risks. And fundamental to a blockchain ecosystem is that ultimately there's some end goal, some end result, some value, or some result that we're all trying to achieve together through networked resources. And so the principles that she lays out in a lot of her work around managing common pool resources, I think is a really great place to start for anybody who's thinking about decentralizing governance. And then Christopher Allen, he's actually one of the very, very early Bitcoin developers, and he worked for a long time for a company called Blockstream, but he was also instrumental around a movement that started the middle of last year called token ethics. So if you just Google token ethics, you'll find a whole series of resources and discussions that they came together and had. One of my very good friends, Noah Thorpe, was involved on that, and it's people like Noah and like Christopher Allen who are both very, very competent technical software developers, but also deeply ethical human beings, who I think we should look to for how we think about governing blockchain ecosystems going forwards, because really that's what's going to make the difference. It's can we actually believe that these people truly have the ethical foundation to sort of lead a decentralized group forwards, because that's really the only thing that's going to hold it together. It's that sense of legitimacy, it's a sense that we can trust the people who are making the rules, and the sense that they're making the rules not to benefit themselves, but to actually benefit the entire ecosystem.
So obviously, Tony, you're very interested in looking at the whole blockchain ecosystem from legal, ethical, and policy perspective. And Joe, you're interested in looking at things from a software engineer's background. And for me personally, I'm very interested in looking at how the development of technology is shaping certain culture or creating a new culture in society, and whether that culture is shared only by a certain group of people. I mean, it's really hard to define a culture right now because everything's still in its very early stage. But just being in the space, what's your personal view on the culture that's starting to build around this crypto space?
That's a really interesting question, Jocelyn. It's actually, I think, something that a lot of my friends are grappling with who were sort of fairly early on into this space. at the time, back in 2010, 2011, 2012, there weren't that many people involved, and it was a very, very tight group of individuals who all had a fairly common set of ideals. And then what we've seen over the last couple of years is we've seen a lot of people pile in because they see a lot of opportunity for gaining a lot of wealth. We see big banks coming in, we see enterprise companies coming in, and to be honest, I think it's mixed. There are still a lot of idealistic people involved. I think a lot of them might be starting to get a bit jaded because it just feels like different sets of values are coming into the space. But at the same time, I think this in some ways mirrors the original internet and the way that the internet developed originally. And there was a lot of feeling that this was, again, it was going to completely transform the world, and it was going to completely transform everything, and that everything was going to get decentralized and we'd be able to have peer-to-peer everything. And then there was like a move back sort of in the last decade towards sort of more centralized systems, and we had sort of big companies, the top 5-6 companies by market cap in the world are all internet or technology companies right now, and they've amassed a huge amount of power, they've amassed a huge amount of ability to control the way that we interact and connect with each other. And so I think that one of the things that we need to think about with the way that the sort of culture is going to evolve is, we've got to try and find those individuals that really do share our sort of morals and share our values.
I think my perception of the culture, with the question you're asking, is that it kind of seems like to some people decentralized is just a word that they need to use to make their ICO work properly, right? Like some of these people that are just in it for the money. And that's why coming to your talk after the conference was refreshing, because it was 2 days of that and then an actual discussion about how, decentralized governance can work. So I think a lot of people know that it's a technological force that's going to change a lot of things, but at the end of the day, I think they want to keep the control and the governance for themselves and the profits for themselves, at least for now, but maybe for however long they want to. So one thing that I was talking to someone about the other day is that developers and lawyers think about smart contracts totally differently, because if you're a developer, you can see like the tree in the forest, and you can see a smart contract is just a class. It's just like a simple data structure that has like certain functions and certain data inside of it. So really, we need to challenge developers to work with lawyers to get that bigger picture. I think both of them have an incomplete picture. And in terms of like, do developers think about like the ethical and legal aspects of it? I think some of them don't, but I don't think it's everyone. So I definitely think it's a collaborative effort.
I think that a lot of the way that we kind of get to think about ethics and morality is basically through the people that we hang out with. I think that within the context of a lot of companies where you have I guess people just having these conversations in corridors, right, or around the lunch table. I think product managers also have a really interesting role to play because they kind of, in some senses, get to sort of step back and see some of the forest for the trees. I think some of the very best product managers in the future will be tasked with thinking about some of these questions as well. And again, a lot of great software engineers choose to go that route as well and go into product management. And again, I think a lot of the best leaders will, have some of these sort of questions that they're asking of themselves and they're asking of each other. A lot of this comes down to, again, the way that companies themselves are governed, right? Corporate governance is one of the big things that I think we're all thinking about in an age where corporations are having more and more power, and you're seeing a lot of this notion of corporate social responsibility actually evolve into something more than a lot of people criticize that kind of just whitewashing or greenwashing a lot of the potentially bad things that corporations do. But people will start being able to vote more and more with their feet and with their dollars and with their time and their attention. One of my very best friends back in San Francisco was actually sort of a design ethicist at Google. His name is Tristan Harris, and he actually chose to leave Google because they weren't fully listening to a lot of the things that he was trying to say, which was that as designers and as product managers, you kind of have this responsibility to do more than just try and get people's attention as much as possible. You have a responsibility to help people use their time well. He created a whole movement called Time Well Spent, which has evolved into something called the Center for Humane Technology. And he's actually connecting with a lot of leading engineers and designers and product managers around these exact questions. And I know he's connecting with them because a lot of software engineers and coders really want to be having avenues to think about these things and hang out with people who do. Joe, you just to wrap things up, I think. Maybe like we can all kind of talk about our broader personal experiences in terms of how we've seen governance work or not work in some of the places that we've been at.
Or maybe for you, like what's a good example of governance you've seen and maybe a bad example? What works and what doesn't of like the projects that are going on in blockchain right now?
I think that there's a lot of people who are thinking very hard about governance in very good ways, and I think that there's folks such as Charles Hodgkinson, IOHK, there's folks like the folks at Zencash who sort of made a concerted effort to put a lot of sort of resources behind the way that they're making decisions and developing out governance models that certainly have the right intent. I've met some of the founders of Zencash, and they speak very earnestly about their decisions to put governance at the heart of a lot of the ways that they're thinking about how their ecosystems develop. So I think we're very early days, as you were saying, Jocelyn. But I am also encouraged, frankly, by the way that Taiwan is trying to engage with the government itself, because governance isn't just going to be about the way that the blockchain ecosystems govern themselves, but also the way that governments govern blockchain ecosystems, and also the ways that governments use technologies like blockchain to govern society more generally. I think that the ways in which you can increase participation and trust in institutions is something that blockchain technologies more broadly have the potential to do. And so conventional governance mechanisms, both in terms of states and in terms of corporations, can learn a lot from the ways that blockchain ecosystems are thinking about governance. And so it's a wide open world right now. I've got a lot of hope and I've got a lot of optimism for the ways that people like us can work together to make cliche like off the max, but make the world a better place.
Okay. All right. Well, that was us from Uncrypt with Jocelyn. This is Tony and Joe,